Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of Mr. Merrigan's Moments in History. I'm your host, Mr. Merrigan. Today, we're going to continue looking at the economies and the people of the North and the South. And so, our first two videos largely focused on the North, and so we're going to see some shifting towards more focus on the South now. So, again, we focused earlier on the North, heading to the South. The image that we're looking at today is in connection with a very important um, idea, and that is King Cotton. This is the idea that cotton becomes essential and vital to the economy of the South as we make our way closer and closer to the Civil War. And so we are going to discuss today that focus, along with also looking at how there becomes then an increased need for slavery in the South. So, where we're going to begin, we're going to be able to summarize how the economy in the South, unlike that in the North, remained largely agricultural. And we're going to talk about some reasons why industry doesn't take off in the South and why, because of that focus on agriculture, you're going to see an increased need for slaves. We should acknowledge that we are talking about African slaves at this point in history. The Southern economy, I don't want you to get the indication that the Southern economy stifled, because it didn't. It grew and it was expanding very, very quickly. But it is going to rely very heavily on agriculture, and in particular on cash crops that are very labor intensive. And so, because of that, there's going to be a very heavy need and reliance on slavery, and in particular, African slaves. And so, I've got an image here that I want to share with you guys that talks a little bit about the change in cotton production. I want you to focus in particular on the changing in the map. So, you're going to see that by 1860, cotton production is going to increase by over 50%, 57.75% of the production is made up of cotton as far as U.S. exports go. So in 1820, you can see in here some small pockets in Georgia and South Carolina, both kind of in the northern portion, and the southern portion, a little bit here in Virginia, North Carolina, certainly Tennessee and Alabama have their little pockets, and Louisiana and Mississippi do as well. But if we look at 1860, you see a massive expansion of cotton throughout the South. You find it in new places like Arkansas and throughout much more of Tennessee, into Missouri, and certainly into Florida, and throughout Alabama and Mississippi, and certainly South Carolina, and it expands into um, more places in North Carolina, and it's starting to expand more in Virginia as well. And so there's this massive growth. And so we need to figure out what happens between 1820 and 1860 to create this. One of the pivotal parts of that expansion is an invention, which is the cotton gin by Eli Whitney. And we have discussed this already as part of our technology, but I wanted to come back to it because it plays a really essential role in the economy and on the institution of slavery in the South. So you're going to see that by about 50 times, Eli Whitney's invention, the cotton gin, dramatically increases production. And again, it produces or increases that production of cotton by nearly 50%. And so while this is so pivotal and it helps increase the production of cotton in the South, it doesn't change how cotton is grown and how cotton is harvested. It helps clean it faster. And so farmers want to grow more cotton, they want to harvest more cotton. In order to do that, they need more labor. And so Whitney's invention is going to have some very important consequences. Prior to the cotton gin, you were seeing actually a decrease in the need for slavery and the amount of slavery in the United States. That's going to change with the cotton. And so since the cotton gin could process this crop, cotton, so quickly, you're going to have some cause and effects here. So the first part I want to talk about is that farmers wanted to plant more cotton. They wanted to increase their profits. If they have the land, they could expand, could grow more cotton, harvest more cotton, they could sell more, and they could make more money. However, in order to plant more, you need more slaves. You need more labor in order to do that, to work in the fields. And so, because of that increase in planting and harvesting, and because there isn't technology to replace that manual labor, there becomes a new need for more slaves in that part of the production. And then lastly, this need, this demand increases the value of enslaved people. And in turn, it's going to increase their role in producing cotton. It's going to become essential to the plantation system that the South is trying to create when it comes to producing things like cotton. And so, more profits, more need for labor, increased importance in enslaved people in the South's economy. So, just a quick check in here. By how much did Whitney's cotton gin increase production of cotton per day? And we mentioned this earlier, it's 50 times more. So it's B is the best answer here. So building off of this, I also want to describe how industry developed slowly in the South and for a variety of reasons. And so with so much emphasis on industry in the North and so much focus on agriculture in the South, why does the South see this industry develop so slowly? Why does it take so long? Well, the first part of this equation is cotton. Cotton sales were extremely profitable. And so if you could make good money in agriculture, that made it less likely for people to want to delve into this newfound industry. And it's something that is well established, well understood. A lot of people knew how to grow cotton well. And so they make the choice that it's in their best interest to make money by sticking with agriculture. Southerners also lacked capital to invest in their businesses. Just a reminder that capital is money for investment. Starting a business, starting a factory system is expensive. You have to have the money up front before you start making money. And so, because of that lack of capital, fewer Southerners invested in businesses such as creating factories. Third part of the equation is that the market for manufactured goods was actually relatively small. There wasn't a lot of demand in it for the South. And part of that is that a good portion of the population, a large part of the population of enslaved people, did not have money to buy this merchandise. So the question kind of becomes, who are you going to sell it to? How are you going to make more profits? And if a good size of your population doesn't have money to buy the products, it becomes harder and harder to get more and more customers. So part of it is just a lack of opportunity to sell your goods, especially if a good portion of your population doesn't own or doesn't have money. And then the last part is that a lot of Southerners just didn't want it. They didn't want industry. They knew this way of life around agriculture. They liked it. It's what they grew up with. It's part of their tradition. It's a part of their heritage. It's a part of their history. And they didn't want it to change. And so, for a lot of the same reasons, that we highlighted in the North as far as prejudice and discrimination, the South did a lot to keep those things there. Prejudice with the ideas, discrimination with the actions. They wanted things to stay the same. So, cotton sales are booming, a lack of capital to invest to get started in this process, a large population that had no money, and frankly, a lot of Southerners didn't want it. Those all add up to the focus in agriculture and the lack of industry in the South. So, just to kind of come back to this cotton production between 1820 and 1860, you're going to see in 1820, the amount of areas that could produce up to 40 bales per square mile, kind of scattered throughout the South. And so that means of production certainly gets greatly increased, especially with the cotton gin as we get closer to the 1860s. You can see that the areas that can create that same up to 45 dramatically expand throughout the United States, especially the southern United States. And now you've got more and more areas that actually go beyond that. Those are the areas kind of our red color. So again, we're highlighting the importance of cotton in the economy. I do want to note that there were some Southerners who defied the odds and did become rather successful in industry. And I don't want you to get the impression that there's no industry in the South. There just isn't nearly as much as there is in the North. And then we'll talk about the consequences of that perhaps once we get to the Civil War, especially the Confederacy. So William Gregg and Joseph Reed Anderson, these two are they're rare, but they are examples of successful Southern industrialists who kind of go against the majority of the culture and have success in industry. And so certainly the exception to the rule as far as industrial growth goes. We should also notice too that most southern towns reflect the importance of agriculture because they're located along ways to ship products. And so where you do see the majority of cities is typically utilizing waterways. So we see them along coasts and we see them along rivers. Because one of the things we should note is that there are very few railroads and roadways being developed in the South in order to ship products. A lot more focus on, whoops, sorry, a little too fast, on shipping things over the water. So using ships and of course using roadways. I want to show you guys this graphic. You can look at the totals certainly of railway tracks in the United States. But look in the north here how we have so many cities connected to each other between say Boston, New York, Philadelphia, Cincinnati, Pittsburgh, Detroit, Chicago, and we're even getting into St. Joseph. And how well connected they are with railway. Let's look at the southern port. You've got Richmond, you've got Norfolk and Charleston to some degree, although not as well connected as New Orleans, Louis. And Houston is actually quite isolated. And so you can see this is all going to play a role, like I mentioned, in as we get closer to the end of the Civil War, or get closer to the Civil War. But you're going to see that is a big difference in the amount. And then lastly, what's the main reason that the Southern economy remained largely agricultural? So options here include Southerners lacked the capital to start industry, cotton sales were very profitable, Southerners refused to work in factories, or D, the cost to ship goods to markets were too high. The best answer here, you could certainly say A is important, but probably the best answer is B. That would be the main reason, is that it was just so profitable in the South. So ladies and gentlemen, that is going to wrap up our discussion of the economy of the South. We will wrap up this unit by talking about the people of the South and the experience there, and we'll get to that again in the next video. For my students, please make sure that you're following along with the guided notes. For those of you who are listening, I appreciate it. Again, this is a little bit one of our longer videos, but I appreciate you listening. Thank you. Have a wonderful day, and that's going to wrap up this edition of Mr. Merrigan's Moments in History.